You've been described as feisty, a man with a big ego, a hard worker. What kind of man are you? What's your personality like?
Man don't have an ego. He don't have any money, and he doesn't have any ambition. Certainly I got an ego.
How large of an ego? Egomaniac?
Sufficient to do the job that I want to do, which means you have to have an imagination. And if you don't have an imagination, then you'll be working for somebody the rest of your life. Imagination goes in our business, the labor business, as the innovations of new ideas for the labor unions, like pension, welfare, and dental eyeglass, the whole shot. When you talk about feisty, of course, what the hell do you think? Somebody's going to push me? I don't get pushed. And if that's feisty, of course, if somebody argues with me, I take them on. If somebody wants to wrestle with me, well, I take them on too.
How old are you now?
62.
62. You think in the last 20 years you've become feistier?
No.
Mellow?
Matter of fact, a little less feistier.
You've mellowed with old age.
No, I wouldn't say I'm mellow. I would just say I got more common sense than I had before. I used to take anybody on. Now I select who I take on.
In 1963, when Playboy interviewed you in the international office in Washington, they asked you how much you were worth. And your
Never interviewed me.
Yeah, they did. October of 63, the interview appeared.
I can't remember than that.
And your comment was, that's what Kennedy's trying to find out, and you laughed. You talk about your wealth now?
No, I would say I don't have to have a tag day. I think I'll be able to eat, live comfortable for the rest of my life, but so far as what I have, let it speak for itself. It's been in the press.
Millionaire? Obviously.
I would say.
Billionaire?
I don't care to comment on it.
Zillionaire?
I don't care to comment on it.
That's one of your favorite terms, isn't it?
Just say that I have sufficient money that I don't think myself or my family will want anything.
You told me once that you and Jimmy Jr. got into a discussion about money.
Mm-hmm.
And your comment was, how many men can come up with $2 million cash now?
I would say exactly right. How many men, I'll say, put it to you this way, today, because of what's happening. How many men can not come up with $2 million, as I said then? How many million men today can come up with $100,000 cash? I just read an article the other day, in one of the financial letters I get, that they estimate that there's less than 1/2% of people who have over $50,000 liquid cash that they can lay their hands on overnight. And that applies to millionaires and I'd like to say sometimes zillionaires. They don't have liquid assets. They have assets which are paper assets, and they go up and down overnight.
What are you living for today?
For the sake of living, I enjoy every minute of it. Good, bad, or indifferent, I enjoy life every day, and I'm looking forward in enjoying that life to be part of the labor movement.
Jimmy spoke matter-of-factly about the events leading up to his release from prison and the 1980 restriction. Hoffa believed that President Nixon and Attorney General John Mitchell knew nothing about the 1980 restriction, quietly added to Hoffa's commutation by John Dean, a key Nixon aide and attorney, and Charles Colson, another Nixon aide who later became a Teamster lawyer. Dean and Colson were the key Nixon men Frank Fitzsimmons needed to keep Jimmy Hoffa out of the Union. Also playing a role against Jimmy, he said, was Clark Mullenhoff, a reporter from Iowa who was always attacking Hoffa, charging wholesale corruption in the Teamsters, and who a decade earlier had convinced Bobby Kennedy that the Teamsters and Jimmy Hoffa were worth investigating. How did you and Fitzsimmons split? What brought it about?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, when I found out that Fitzsimmons lied when he said he had been constantly talking to Mitchell trying to get me out.
This is after you were convicted and after you went to prison?
Yeah.
All right.
And after I got out of prison, all during the time I was in prison when Mitchell was there, he kept telling everybody, my son, my lawyers, all the union representatives, now don't do anything, you'll rock the boat, I'm taking care of Mitchell. Well, when we took Mitchell's deposition, he said the first time Fitzsimmons ever talked about me was in June 1971. when I'd already resigned and ready and give Fitzsimmons a green light to become president. And then when I found out that he had put Colson on, instead of, and fired Ed Bennett Williams. And then when I found out I had a 1980 restriction, it didn't take a ton of bricks to fall on me and put two and two together. He'd been lying all along.
You said he's going to work on Mitchell. What was he going to do?
He claimed all that, and he implied to the whole convention that he was responsible for me getting a rehearing on my parole, and that Mitchell was going to take executive action and have me leave the prison. Well, when we took the deposition, Mitchell said, I talked to Fitzsimmons about Hoffa, amongst other things, in June 1971. Well, it was a complete flat lie he'd been telling everybody in the union for a period of almost 5 years.
How did your parole come about?
Well, I'd say it, and I say it again. My parole came about from the standpoint of over 1.5 million signatures to the President of the United States, the rank and file members, the Teamsters, and their friends. Came about by hundreds of thousands of letters going into the President and the Attorney General, to their senators and congressmen and direct, seeking my release, and by hundreds of people who went to Washington personally, trying to see these their senators, congressmen, or their Attorney General or the President to get me released. And facing the coming convention, and facing the election after the convention, he didn't want, in my opinion, to have to answer to all those people that he had said to him, I won't do anything at all, and I reject your request. So he met with Mitchell, according to Mitchell, and according to his affidavit, and they discussed the release of one James R. Hoffa, and it was agreed I would be released before Christmas. And he left it up to Mitchell. Mitchell got a hold of the Paroles and Pardons Chairman. He made a recommendation in recognition of what apparently Mitchell had talked to the President about. And the end result was that they got a recommendation from the Pardons and Parole Board, or Commutation Board, of May 10th, 1973, to let me out before Christmas. And that came about by computation of my time served, my good time, my extra good time, which let me out on December 22nd.
What year?
1971. Now, immediately thereafter, when he sent that recommendation to the White House, and it's again a matter of record, Dean says that he intercepted it and tried to imply, and Mitchell refused to accept the statement of Dean, tried to imply that he and Mitchell had talked about changing Mitchell's original letter of recommendation to the President to the 1980 restriction, and Mitchell refused it in two affidavits and had sworn testimony that this never happened.
The original letter from Mitchell did not have the 80 restriction.
It got it in March 10th, 1973. And that, furthermore, he called in Colson and Molotov and talked to them prior to sending it in to the President, the 1980 restriction, without talking to the Attorney General or without talking to the President, and said that the way that he did not talk to the President was that he had Larry Traylor, who's head of the Pardons and Commutation Board, simply rewrite the recommendation of Mitchell without consulting Mitchell or without letting Mitchell see the rewriting to 1980 restriction, but also said that he kept it confidential and private even from anybody in the White House or the press until 14 minutes after I was out of jail. Because they were convinced that if I knew the 1980 restriction was there, that would not have accepted the commutation as it was drafted. So they didn't tell the warden, they didn't tell the Director of Bureau of Prisons that this 1980 was in there, knowing that I would have refused to accept it if I didn't know what was in there, because I only had to go to 1974.
Now, who is they? They didn't tell.
Well, Mitchell, Dean, Larry Traylor, the Director of Bureau of Prisons, Carlson didn't tell the warden, who was the only man I had contact with, and the chief caseworker, Danoff, about the 1980 restriction, and admit they didn't tell him.
Didn't the president sign this?
Oh, sure, but along with 212 other ones.
You didn't read it?
Never, I couldn't read it. It wasn't in there. It wasn't anything I signed.
Your attorneys didn't read it?
Nobody knew. They admit nobody knew until 14 minutes after I was out of prison. The day I announced to the public, to myself, to the warden, my attorneys, that this was a 1980 restriction. I found out about it hours later when I arrived in St. Louis through a news commentator.
That doesn't sound like
When I went to the Robson held the parole board after the holidays, he didn't know about it. Nobody had informed him. And he had to call and talk to Washington and find out what they were talking about. And then on the 14th day of January, I received through the mail the 1980 restriction. I refused to sign it because I had asked the warden specifically before I left the prison, was there any other restriction besides March 10th, 1973, and he said no, after calling Washington.
Who was behind the 1980 restriction?
In my opinion, Dean, Ballenhoff, Olson, and Fitzsimmons.
A conspiracy.
I would say certainly was an understanding of every one of them getting a piece of pie that they wanted, and they used Dean to get the pie.
Do you think Richard Nixon knew of that 1980 restriction when he signed your paper?
Don't believe it. Don't believe it. One of these days I'll prove it.
Do you think, or straight question, was there any financial deal made with President Nixon to get you out of prison?
Fitzsimmons says no. He says he only gave him $14,000.
There was no other political...
I was in prison. I talked to nobody. Had no way of knowing whether there was or there wasn't.
You had no one approach Richard Nixon on your behalf?
Oh, of course I did. I had the people who sent petitions,
Well, let me qualify.
the people who sent the letters, and personal visits.
All right, you had no one approach Richard Nixon and say, look, $100,000 goes into your campaign.
Absolutely not. Positively not. I did not.
So there was no offer of whether
I
you
had
thought about it.
nobody go there. If anybody went there without my knowledge, even though there's a floating around a statement that Dorfman, during his trial in New York, said that he had a receipt signed by Mitchell for a large sum of money as a contribution.
How much?
Now, that's never been proven. I think Overdrive said $150,000. I'm not sure. But that's never been proven either.
What about Frank Fitzsimmons?
What the hell about him? You know what you said? He's a double-crosser. That's all there is to it.
You said...
Man, I took off the truck, made him an officer of the union, saw that for the first time in his life he had more than one suit, lived in a decent home, had an expense account, kept raising him up through the ranks of labor, and finally general vice president at the convention. And when I went to jail, he took over the presidency, and then he became power hungry, and accepted the belief that he was a great labor leader, and came about doing what he did in the 1980 restriction, in my opinion.
How do you get the belief that he was a great labor leader?
How the hell do I know? How do a lot of people get? Look at some of the congressmen and senators we got. They couldn't spell a rat backwards, couldn't make a living. They get elected, and for Christ's sake, they're on TV yakking around, telling you how to run the world and run your own life, and couldn't run their life or their own family's life. Same thing with him. They look in the mirror too often. They grow by inches, sideways and up and down, but don't grow and their head gets fatter, but they don't get any more sense than they had before.
Recently I asked you about Frank Fitzsimmons, and you said he's gone nuts, that's all.
Well, I think he's gone completely power nuts, that's my opinion.
And I asked you what happened to the friendship, and you said somebody took him to the mountain.
No question about that. They took him top of the mountain, showed him the valley, and he bought the valley. But he forgot the membership and forgot the officers, and forgot his responsibility of the oath he took for office.
Who took him to the mountain?
I would think, in all probability, knowing what happens in Washington, I was there long enough to know, the employers, the politicians, people who wanted favors, took him atop the mountain, made him think he's a big man.
Anybody specific?
No, I wasn't there. If I seen him, I couldn't say it.
You told me in an earlier interview you said it was Colson.
Oh, that's just one of the many. Just one of the many. Took more than Colston to run the many. I think he took him by the hand and led him to the top of the mountain, but they held a lot of people. It was part of that parade.
To keep you out of politics?
To keep him in power and me out of power.
You gave the first loan, you say, to La Costa.
Yeah.
$10 million.
Well, somewhere around there, yeah.
How'd that come
It's been a
about?
long time ago. Well, what the hell, Mo had owned Desert Inn. He had owned other office buildings and other businesses. We loaned him money. He paid him back. He's a good businessman. When you want to go into the La Costa Enterprise, real estate was booming at that time. Everybody was prosperous, and it couldn't go wrong. And he kept expanding it like any other business to meet up with the requirements. And it's a goodbye today. Ain't nothing wrong with the loan today.
Was Meyer Lansky pay any part of that?
Meyer Lansky had no more to do with more data than you had, in my opinion. It's all newspaper nonsense.
You good friends with Meyer Lansky?
I know.
Ever do business with him?
Nope. Never asked me to. My opinion, he's another victim of harassment.
You don't think he's a member of organized crime?
I don't believe there's any organized crime, period. Don't believe it, never believed it. Said it since I said it for the last 40 years. Hoover said it. He's supposed to be the greatest law enforcement man in America with the means to find out. He said there was no mafia, no so-called organized crime.
No mafia?
That's what he said. That's what Hoover said.
Well, McClellan said just the opposite.
Oh, what the hell, he's an idiot. Senile old man. He knows more about the mafia than any one guy in the world if he wanted to tell the truth.
McClellan said in May of
Ask
58,
about Vincent Cole.
he said in 58 that you know more dangerous criminals than Dave Beck.
Aha, that's a different question. I don't deny the fact that I know, I think, what's going on in most of the big cities in the United States. And that means knowing the people who are in the big cities. Well, it's no different than the police departments, no different than the banks, no different than insurance companies, no different than politicians. You're a damn fool not to be informed what makes a city run when you're trying to do business in the city.
What about people like Meyer Lansky, Costello?
What about them?
Well, they say, you know, they're organized crime members, members of the mafia. The Senate committee said so.
Yeah, sure. They said I was associated with the mafia. They said Dorfman was part of the mafia. And it's a complete 100% lie. They know it. Everybody else knows it. So it's easy to say, oh, he's a mafia member because he got an Italian name. Once in a while they say, oh, a man like Meyer Lansky was a Jew. Oh, well, he was accepted.
He was a
financial wizard. Pure bull. Pure bull. Don't believe no such a thing.
Paul the Waiter Rica.
What about him? Jesus Christ Almighty was in Chicago for 99 years and a day, and they thought he was so much involved in organized crime. Why didn't they arrest him? Hell of a note that the FBI and the Congress, the newspapers, and everybody else says so-and-so is part of the mafia, so-and-so is doing this stuff. Why don't they arrest him? Why the hell don't they put him on trial? What the hell are they doing? Keeping him alive like a mummy so they can keep writing about him?
Where's he now?
Who's dead? Dead. What the hell, what are you talking about all these people?
Didn't the Teamsters buy an estate in Indiana?
Of course they did. We bought it so Bert Brennan and I went down and looked at it, and we bought it for a school for business agents.
Was it ever used for your school?
No, because of the McClellan Committee. If it wasn't for the McClellan Committee, we'd have certainly had it for a school for business agents. It was an ideal location. Would have saved us a lot more money than we spent on hotels and various other places where we held our business agents' meetings. And we'd have privacy, which you don't have in a hotel.
But Johnny Deal,
Friend of mine, no question about that.
member of organized crime?
like you are,
Member of the Mafia?
like you are. 'Cause I don't-
Convicted of extortion?
It's a different question. I know Johnny's case. I know what Johnny's in jail for. Don't agree with it. Trying to help him get out. Should be out. Our association's trying to help him get out. And he's a victim of newspaper publicity, just like I was. Damn funny that all these people are supposed to be a part of organized crime and have millions and millions of dollars. Can't afford to hire lawyers. Damn funny. I saw some of the biggest ones that there was supposed to be in prison, and their wives are on welfare, and they couldn't get in and didn't have enough money to come down and visit them, and yet they keep talking about the millions they got.
Like whom?
Well, I don't care to mention their name and embarrass them, but I seen them. They're there. Damn funny. I know people in town here, right in Detroit. They're part of the mafia. Well, Christ, they make a living. How come if they're part of the mafia, they're not making a living?
Care to be specific?
No, I don't want to. Everybody knows who they are. The police department knows, the prosecutor's office knows, the media knows.
Giacalone? I asked Jimmy about Tony Jack Giacalone. A friend, said Jimmy. But this is the man, the FBI says, who set up the fateful meeting, the meeting Jimmy Hoffa never came back from. Giacalone is reputed to be the enforcer of the Detroit mob. Here's a guy who's about 6 feet tall, silver hair, dresses like GQ, Gentleman Quarterly. I mean, here's a guy who can flash a smile 1 minute, slam a revolving door into the face of a reporter the next minute, smashing his nose, and then smile again in a way that makes chills run your spine. Watching Giacalone is like watching a cobra moving back and forth in front of you, waiting for the one moment you blink, to strike.
Giacalone. Giacalone's a businessman.
That has dealings with LaCosta.
I have no dealing with LaCosta. What the hell's he got to do with LaCosta?
He was named as one of the dealers in
Well,
LaCosta.
they're an absolute lie. They know it. I know it. The record speaks for itself. Got nothing more to do with LaCosta than you have. He may have visited it, went to the spa, or down to one of the tournaments out there in golf, because he's a golfer. But he's got as much to do with LaCosta as you have.
But Giacalone was named as a member of organized crime by a Senate committee back in...
What the hell has that got to do with? I appeared in front of the same Senate committee and they lied about me. They lied about Giacalone. They never proved it. And if they had such a charge as they said was true, why the hell didn't they charge everybody with conspiracy and go to court? I saw that chart on the wall, the blood stains supposedly.
Conspiracy is hard to prove. It's almost impossible
Like
to prove.
hell, the easiest crime in the world to prove. Anybody that ever indicted for conspiracy, the lawyer would tell you, it's the easiest crime the government can prove, and that's why they put it on the books, this conspiracy. The mere fact that you meet with somebody, or the fact that circumstantial evidence is involved in meetings, association. What are you talking about? It's the easiest crime in the book to prove. That's why they use conspiracy.
Did you ever wiretap anybody?
I've hired people to secure information any way they could possibly secure it.
Did they do it by wiretapping?
I didn't ask them. Not interested.
Did you tap Bobby Kennedy?
If they did, I don't know, but I received information on Kennedy. How they got it, none of my business, wouldn't want to know it.
Did you tap the FBI?
No, I didn't tap him. Somebody else, Bernie Spindell, set up a monitoring system in Chattanooga and took out of the air on 3 different channels the FBI had that they were violating the law, and they were surveilling my lawyers, surveilling my witnesses, and we also proved that they were attempting to get information which was tantamount to interfering with justice. And then we submitted that to the judge in writing. He opened it, charged that we had tricked him, and had a fit because he found out the truth, that we knew the truth. And the next batch that we handed him, he wouldn't open. Because he knew what in there, he had made a telephone conversation with Bobby Kennedy in the middle of the trial.
What judge was that?
Frank Wilson.
Then obviously you issued orders to tap Wilson's phone.
No, not a question of tapping Wilson's phone. It's the
Tapping Kennedy's phone.
no, take it out of the air. No.
What do you mean out of the air? How the hell do you take a phone call out of the air?
Now
Unless
listen
it's
to
from
me.
a
Now
car.
listen to me. Don't tell me what they can do. I have the proof. I know what happened. And I know that Bobby Kennedy, through the conversation of the FBI that we took out of the air, and matter of record in the court in Chattanooga, check it out, talked about Frank Wilson, and we accused him of it. And Frank Wilson finally admitted he did talk to Bobby Kennedy, but said he was talking to him about hiring clerks for overtime typing in the Hoffa case. But it took 45 minutes to do it.
How did you take it out of the air?
By about a ton of equipment. Bernie brought a ton of equipment down, air freight, set it up into, we gave him a suite, he set it all up. And being the best expert in the United States, he just reached out and set up his own communication system and took it out of the air.
Zapped it right off the phone lines, huh?
Took it right out of the air. Everything was going on. They knew it could be done. They do it every day of the week.
Oh, bullshit.
Don't tell me it's bullshit. I'm telling you they can do it. I can do it. I can bring Bernie's successor down here, set it up here right now in this room here, take it right out of the air. What the state police have got, the city police have got, the FBI.
Off the monitors.
Yes, sir. Now off with the conversation between the cars and what they put over their own channels. They have private channels.
Granted, yeah, that's fine. But what about phone conversations?
What about it? They talk about phone conversations. They're privy to what's going on with the judge.
All right, they're talking about it. In other words, specifically telephones were not
Once
tapped.
we knew through the FBI and the agents that were putting it all over the air that Wilson had talked to Bobby Kennedy, we then went to Wilson, filed an affidavit, and was going to ask for a new trial, and judge lawyers didn't have the guts to do it. I insisted they go in and show it to Wilson. When Wilson seen it, he copped out.
Isn't that kind of stupid?
But what else could he do?
Well, I mean, isn't it kind of stupid for the FBI to get on two-way radios and discuss it?
If you would listen to what they discussed, you would know how stupid their conversation was. Read it. It's a matter of record. Go get the record. Boy, go home. Boy, what are you doing down here? He's got us on the channel. You better switch to the next channel. For Christ's sake, what are you talking about? Over 100 pages we took out of the air. We know what the FBI was doing.
Did you ever tap Bobby Kennedy?
I never tapped nobody.
Did you ever give orders for Bobby Kennedy's to be, and
I
John
gave
Kennedy?
information. I hired people to secure information for me so I can protect myself from not only the Kennedys, other people. And what they brought me, I never inquired how they got the information. Don't care how they got it. I want to be informed.
Did you ever issue orders for Marilyn Monroe's phone to be tapped?
That's the silliest thing I ever heard in my whole life.
But yet the tapes are supposed to be in existence now
Oh,
with Mrs.
that's a
Fidel.
lot of crap. They never said no such a tape and everything. I read that stupid statement in that stupid book. And that Mailer that wrote the book, I think his name was,
Norman Mailer.
the stupidest thing I ever read in my whole life, and he knows it's a lie, and everybody else knows it's a lie.
You think Marilyn
And he
Monroe?
admitted that he never interviewed one person, that all he did was get the clips, gather information other people had wrote, and wrote a book on it. And I understand right now he's in the process of writing a book on me.
James R.
And when
Hawk.
he does, I'm going to sue him. Very simple.
What if he calls you and says, can I interview?
Wouldn't talk to him under no circumstances. I think he must be some kind of a nut.
Well, what about the allegations that was made in Rolling Stone magazine that there are tapes in existence now of Marilyn Monroe's
I'll tell you
conversation?
what I'll do. I'll give $25,000 for the tape. That's a very simple thing. Bring it up here. It's worth $25,000 to me. I want to hear it.
Didn't you have that opportunity? Didn't you talk to Mrs. Bernie Spindell if she had the tapes?
You don't have no such a thing at all, my dear friend.
Did you ask her about it?
No question about it. There's no such a thing.
And she said, they don't exist.
And never heard of it.
Like geese.
Well, they were coming over the hunkers.
Yeah, there's 3 hookers.
There was 100 on the lake this morning.
Would you, did you think of it at the time, the tap?
Marilyn Monroe, I never knew she existed with Bobby Kennedy. If I did, I would have told him about it in an open hearing.
You didn't know that she allegedly was